Hello, I'm Paul Suff, editor of The Environmentalist. I'm joined by Tim Balcon, CEO of Iema. Hello, Tim.
Afternoon.
I know you started about 12 months ago, and you spent the first few months talking to Iema members, talking to business leaders about the role of environmental sustainability professionals. Tell me, what did you find out?
Well, you're quite right. We spent a lot of time talking to our members, and we will continue to talk to our members, and there were some really clear messages that come out from them. The first one was this is a changing profession, and I'll perhaps come back to that a little bit later. But to underpin that, they wanted their profession to be understood. They wanted their profession to have the same credibility that engineers and financial directors also have. They also wanted or told us that skills is really very important to them, and their skills development, their career pathway is something that is perhaps number one priority, and therefore they'd want some more help associated to that. To underpin those 2 points, the one word that kept coming out loud and clear was influence. Our members consider themselves to be change agents, to people who want to transform businesses, and they wanted an organisation, an institution that would help them do that. Well, Iema's responded quite radically to some of the requests that we've got from our members. So there's a number of things that they'd want to do. The first thing is to embrace a much wider remit than environmental and audit management. So we are now embracing sustainability. So if you will have noticed that we now have the Global Association of Corporate Sustainability Officers. That's within our family of Iema now. We're going to keep the brand, but that brings in people who are working at sea level and have that influence to Iema, so that we can start to learn from each other and understand those skills. The second thing is that they wanted an international feel. They felt if they are going to be transformational, a lot of the businesses that they're working work internationally, and therefore our qualifications, our membership structure should better reflect that international feel. In terms of skills, what they're asking us to do, or what we've responded to, is to give them a much bigger engine to drive those skills. And what we've done is we've created sustainability training solutions as an organisation. That's a wholly owned subsidiary of Iema. And ostensibly what that does, it brings together all of our training providers so that we can provide a much more comprehensive response.
Are we talking about some key skills that environmentalists seem to be lacking at the moment?
I think the one thing that stands out is influence. How can they be more transformational? The frustration is that they can see how an organisation can benefit from the skills that they have, and have not quite got to the point of being able to turn the organisation into their way of thinking. But there's a new cohort that's coming to us as well. So we're now, because we're embracing sustainability international, there are a whole series of people who have learnt their professions through a different trade. So for example, you'll see an engineer or a financial director or a HR director who are now working for an organisation that has sustainability embedded within it. And those guys need to know how to do it. So those guys don't necessarily want to be the professional in the way that our environmental managers are, but actually would want to know what that means. So how to buy those skills, what does their organisation do, where can they learn from? So when you look at the package of changes that we've put in place, we feel now that we've got an offer for all of those people moving forward.
Are organisations looking at environmental professionals to provide the sort of sustainability solutions that you're suggesting that most of them need?
The forward-thinking ones are, but that's a minority. And even those organisations, 65% of those organisations that do employ environmental professionals don't have an environmental skills strategy. So there's clearly some work to do even within the family of those organisations who want to do something.
So when you say an environmental skills strategy, try and break that down for me, exactly what you mean.
Well, if you are an organisation and you profess to be to understand how the environment can bring the opportunities to you, you would need people with skills to be able to realise that potential. It's not going to happen from using your existing skills and then saying you need to be more environmentally friendly. So there needs to be something much more substantial, which is I now need some knowledge and understanding, some skills, so that I understand why it's important that we manage our waste properly. It's important that our energy supplies, and increasingly so, that how we use our resources to the best effect, particularly if you're a manufacturing organisation. That resource management is increasingly going more critical as each year goes by. So there needs to be a suite of skills ranging from the people that's doing their existing job to understand context, to the people at senior level to understand what governance looks like with sustainability and environmental practice, how a board engages with the organisation, and how a board makes sure that the organisation's structure actually is able to discharge those responsibilities.
How much is it, this skills agenda, and we'll call it the sustainability skills agenda, how much is that just for people in Iema and environment professionals, and how much is it for people at the top, middle managers, people down on the shop floor?
Well, let me give you the business case for why that's important. A number of points here. So a third of the economic growth in 2011 was delivered from, if you like, the green skills, those kind of areas. The green businesses just in the UK alone contributed to £5 billion to our GDP. If you look at the skills deficit, it would be double in 2014. Were it not for those organisations delivering on green skills. So in terms of economic growth and business need, it's fairly obvious what the requirements are. So you go back to your initial question about how do organisations engage with this. Well, first we need to bring them the business case for doing it. The government's own report said that organisations that can respond to this have a potential saving of £23 billion across the economy. These are massive savings that our members are doing every day of their working life. So what we now need to do is to sort of bring that best practice to those organisations that we haven't quite captured yet.
It makes you wonder why they're frustrated in the amount of influence that they actually wield at the moment, because those savings are there. So why aren't they making the leap to being better understood?
Businesses work in various systems. So if you look at their accountability structure, look at people's targets and performance measures, generally speaking around P&L measures. And it's quite hard sometimes to equate environmental management to a P&L, particularly if you're not receptive to the language. And where the frustration comes is our members can actually quite easily do that. That's what they do. That's why they've learnt these skills in the first place. It's almost of getting the person to listen on the other side that says, you know what, we can really transform this organisation and do some fantastic stuff. And it's not just about being green. It's not just about being environmentally friendly. It's about running a good business. And that's why our members get a little bit frustrated. But I think we need to work harder on the language.
Yes, is it about communication skills? Is it about those key business skills like building the business case, being able to manage a project and seeing it through to the delivery?
It's partly about that. It's very difficult to work from I suppose, from the ground floor and influence a business going forward. And this is where Iema as an institution can really help with that, because we need to provide both. We need to provide that individual with the right ammunition so that they can be more influential. But we also need to go back to those boards and chief executives and say, actually, these are the business drivers. So if you just look at the IPCC report and then say, well, okay, well, that's all very interesting, but what does this mean for us? Well, we know that the population is going to grow by 2 billion. We know that the demand for food is going to increase by 50%, for energy by 40%, and water a further 30%. What does that mean for business? It means that that's going to disrupt the supply chain that they currently have working for them. It's going to bring immeasurable new opportunities to them if they're looking in the right place for it. Now, assuming that they are, where do they get an answer in terms of how do they transform their business? Well, it's within Iema, because we have the sustainability professionals and we have the environmental professionals and we have the auditing professionals as well. And actually we can apply this across any country, in any organisation, in any sector.
Now, I know that there are the leading examples. There's the Marks and Spencers, there's Unilevers and so on. They get it, or they seem to get it. But from what you're saying, that needs to go from those big multinationals all the way down to quite small organisations which aren't at all engaged in this agenda. So how can Iema help to influence that?
I sort of dispute the point there. I think there are a number of small businesses. We have one director of a small business on our council, for example, who runs a purely sustainable organisation. And that's leadership. You know, that's taking leadership regardless of whether you're in a small organisation, whether you're a one-man band or whether you're working in a multinational. The difficulty with small organisations is it's harder for those guys to get a voice by the very nature of them being small. So that the more we pick their best practice and the more that we offer their best practice to other small organisations, then the easier that's going to be. The difficulty small organisations have is it's actually quite riskier for them to change their business models because the consequences are more apparent and much more urgent as well. So we need to give them the reassurance in the business case. And it's the same thing, you know, this is not the language of environmental practice and sustainability. It's how do you run a good business, and the reasons why you need to be more sustainable and understand the environment is because this is where the market demands are coming from.
Let's just go back to the skills agenda a bit. You talked about Iema setting up the sustainability training solutions. What else is Iema? How is Iema changing so it's going to actually address some of these issues that the members talked to you about when you first joined?
But what we could offer our members is a much clearer and articulate career pathway from this is where I choose to be an environmental manager or a sustainability practitioner to chief level. And what an individual need to do in order to learn those skills, qualify for various levels of membership. What we can do is to make sure that those levels of membership are really quite meaningful. So a chartered environmentalist has the same weight as a chartered engineer, etc. And behind that, then there will be a series, which is what you mentioned, STS. The idea behind STS is to provide those solutions to them. So at the moment, we offer some fantastic training with our training providers, but we can be much more comprehensive. We can have a much broader range. We can have a much bigger international reach so that the training course that we do in the UK carries the same weight as it does in Nigeria, Australia, and vice versa. So there's an international feel to those, and all of that will give it that credibility. But equally, we just need to recognise that people might learn something from reading an article, and it's capturing that learning in a much more efficient way than we currently do it.
Okay, so how does STS, I guess they will accredit courses, but how does it differ from what you do at the moment in Iema about training?
Well, we currently have training providers that we accredit, and what we felt we needed was to provide a much bigger engine behind this. And there's a lot of employers that's coming to us that's saying, I've got some really good training providers that do some really good stuff, but I haven't got one that can either do me international, give me an international portfolio, or that can cover the whole range of skills in this area. But when you start to collect all of the training providers that we quality assure, actually within those organisations, there's an answer. So it really is about making the offer to employers and individuals much more comprehensive by joining up those training providers. So the idea of STS is to provide that one-stop shop, if you like, to quality assure the training provision. So quality is a really important part of this, and then to bring the market for training much closer to the training providers so that there's a much more efficient and better dialogue between the two.
You say you've got the skills map. Tell me a bit more about the skills map and how that works. I can see from an individual how they can plot their career path, but how are organisations using it?
Well, what an organisation can do is to plot the capabilities that they need against the skills map. So let's take a high-speed 2. I mean, that has huge environmental impact, and there will be a huge supply chain of people and organisations that will need to deliver that particular project. So what the skills map does, it gives organisations and individuals a framework to assess what they need to do against the skills that they require from doing it.
Now, if we fast forward a few years, have you got a vision for what Iema is providing its members and what its typical member might look like?
It's a very difficult question to answer, but let me go in two kind of areas. What we've set up Iema to do is to be very flexible and responsive to how skills and the profession is changing. So we have the people from GAXO and our fellows who are really at the vanguard of environmental practice, plus all of our universities that's associated. So they're telling us where the market's going and how those skills are being used. We have a governance structure now that can take that best practice and that current learning. How can we codify that into membership structures, qualifications, etc. Where I think it will go is I think the profession is, and our members have already told us this, that it's much broader than when they first started, and it's going to continue to expand, but it's not going to leave anything behind. So I suspect what will happen is that there'll be an underpinning core of knowledge that people will need to understand in order to be an environmental or sustainability professional. Then I suspect it will then compartmentalise into various sectors. So it's environmental plus construction, environmental plus manufacturing, environmental plus retail. And I suspect it will start to move in those areas. The other part of that dynamic are the kind of things that you can't codify around leadership and governance. So how do we give the boards the right skills that they can apply their corporate governance to make sure that they can embrace sustainability and some of the things that were mentioned in the IPCC report also as well. So it's very much about providing an institution that responds very quickly and dynamically to where this is going. I think we've set that up.
And lastly, are we moving away from an environmental manager, and are we embracing a sustainability role?
No, I think that will always be a fundamental role, and my guess is that it will become more important as more organisations and businesses start to understand what that role will do. I think what we're seeing is the opportunities for an environmental manager will start to get much broader and much bigger. What we'll also see are people coming in from other sectors into environmental and sustainability, so they would now need to understand that. So I'll give you an example. So many managers are given a finance for non-finance manager. I think there will be in the environment for the non-environmental manager kind of skills learning requirements that we need to offer as well. So this is going to be a much broader scope of skills and expertise that it will
and you can
into.
see Iema appealing to those people as well.
I think what we've got in Iema is exactly those solutions, because now we've got the GAXO that can embrace those kind of people who don't necessarily want to go through the CPD, the membership structure, but these are people that's inventing sustainability for their organisations. These are people that's really demonstrating in leadership, if you like. So it's about taking those. Also, that same group of people that's learnt their skills through the environmental practice are our fellows. So again, it's capturing what those people are learning and what they continue to learn. So have we got that? Absolutely, we've got that within Iema.
Okay, exciting times. Thank you, Tim.
Absolutely. Thank you.